All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of Earn Your Liberation right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball with the fellas, Geechee y'all, brother Diallo. What's up? What's up, fellas? We get started, right? Let's what's going on? How you all feeling this morning?
I feel liberated, and I feel like we finally gonna get our own economy because we got a powerful black man who gonna close the racial wealth gap in 2 days in the whole state of Maryland.
But well, it's easy when you have
the court's top thought leader
representing for.
They want to have black businesses and not just go to the white businesses, and they should have.
It can't go wrong.
We in there.
Like, we in there. So listen, I need to, if you would all forgive me. First of all, welcome everybody. Come on in. Tell a friend to tell a friend. It's on again, like the ear doctor says. Don't be stingy. Put this in the socials. Hit the like button. Do all those things. Subscribe, join, all those things. Before we go anywhere, I would like to jump out here and get something off my chest, so to speak. I just got sent something this morning from Trevor on Instagram. The brother, as I understand, goes by Trevor on Instagram, and I just want to share what that is. Now, apparently, Trevor, after seeing my sort of humorous, non-spoken response to that again, Dr. Carr, Greg Carr, bringing up reference to me and my work on the Karen Hunter show. And if you haven't, it's on our channel. Check that out. And I just played the clip. I didn't say anything. Trevor apparently left a comment on the original video and sent me what is apparently Dr. Carr's response. And to Trevor, not to me, but as you'll see, I think, so Carr says in response, you might have drifted into the wrong viewing stream. Where would you suggest keeping money, which in any money-based economy is a transferable proxy for value and medium of exchange? Carr is hilarious, man. Or should we assume that the revolutionary move would be to abolish money, which I would agree with. If the revolutionary move would be to abolish money, please share your thinking on ways to do that don't start with the purely theoretical organize, which is, of course, a beautiful rhetorical dodge and does not factor in the living reality of the conditions we live in currently. So I don't know what Trevor's comment was. I didn't see that. But never mind the rhetorical flourishes from Dr. Carr. I think this comment here is, and maybe I'm not getting the context, but just left on its own, this comment here, wait, doesn't make any sense to me. Wait, my bad. Let me back up. Let's see. Where he says here that don't start with the purely theoretical organize, which is, of course, a beautiful rhetorical dodge and does not factor in the living reality of the conditions we live in currently. So one, I think it's hilarious and quite a contradiction for Dr. Carr to make reference to anyone else's rhetorical dodges.
Wait, so
beautiful rhetorical dodges. Yeah,
this is a long comment on a post.
This is apparently a comment in response to a comment on the YouTube, the original YouTube of Karen Hunter's show with Carr talking about my book, which I clipped in that meant to be humorous, but, non-spoken response that I posted on our channel. So I'm not sure, So again, I didn't see Trevor's original comment other than he just said he put a comment and then this is Carr's response. But I think, but to be fair to Carr, even on its own, I think Carr says some things here that are interesting, easily disagreeable with, and I just think they're fascinating. But as always, if I have anything wrong, Greg Carr, Dr. Carr, has my number, knows my email, can holler at me anytime and invite me anywhere to any of his multiple platforms for an in-depth discussion, which is ultimately where I want to go with, which is where I'm going with the comment anyway, with what I'm saying here this morning anyway. All the years we were cool, all the years we built together, all the times he's been on my show. Go to imixwhatilike.org now. There is so much Carr content. I don't know how he is made. I don't know how he rationalizes this turn and this the way he is turned to address me specifically. I don't know how he rationalizes it. When we had a disagreement, we invited him here. We had Kalanji hosted us on the platform. He knows that. I mean, he knows me. So this is so that he would be saying all of this in and around me and my work and not to me is unbelievable. And I have to admit it's sad. I mean, this is somebody I have looked up to and gone way out of my way to learn from and build with for years. So anyway, but this point here I just think is woeful. That doesn't make any sense. The idea that organize is simply a rhetorical dodge, a beautiful rhetorical dodge that doesn't relate to the living conditions or the reality that we face today that doesn't make any sense. Especially in the context of his argument on that clip that we should be looking to put our money into black banks and do this, that, and the third, as if that is the solution, as if that isn't some sort of beautiful black capitalist, empty, substanceless rhetoric. But anyway, put another way, as Carr continues, is it possible to organize to redistribute whatever proxy for value, e.g. wealth, money, etc., you might identify in our current conditions while ignoring the material realities that we, including you, unless you are pirating resources, including internet access and a device to use it to engage in this dialogue, struggle against? I assume you do not have any money in a bank, correct? Or alternatively, that you don't distinguish between institutions that hold use and money. So all those years that Carr was presenting on and building with and listening to, for instance, Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Was Clarke engaged in beautiful, empty rhetoric?
Man,
Clarke never once advocated for black capitalists, black banking, investment in this. He always would say he said, I don't understand how there could be black conservatives. What are they trying to conserve? So was Clarke engaged in some empty? This is some silly YouTube commentary. Like, I don't know your Dr. Carr, and you don't have the intellect you have kind of silliness. This is so, and it's so disingenuous and of no value to his own audience. It's so disrespectful. He continues, please be specific if you can. It would be very helpful. And I think everyone seeking answers to how we transform material conditions. Hold on, there's more here.
And he's responding to this other guy comment, right?
No, in response to his comment.
Okay.
Transform the material conditions of our people, including me, would be open to hearing. By the way, many of the most revolutionary orators on this particular subject are fairly well positioned in the petty bourgeois strata with no discernible actions that convey a sense that they're leaving anytime soon. Who are you talking about, Dr. Carr? So seriously, I mean, I am in the petty bourgeois space, clearly, but are you talking about me? Am I one of those revolutionary orators on this particular subject that is fairly well positioned in the petty bourgeois strata? And I wonder if that would hold, given the conversations we used to have when you were chair of the department there in African American Studies, and I was literally calling you, Dr. Carr, asking you, after laying out my horrific situation in relationship to several admin in my university, I said, at one point I called Dr. Carr when we were cool, and I said, what could I do over the next 5-year period to produce work in a kind of way that would make you hiring me in your department a possibility? I was trying to map out a plan to get me out of what my situation into where I thought I might have an escape route. So my point in sharing that is to say, if you're talking about me, that I'm not in some cushy situation, that the HBCU situation is not some cushy situation, certainly not relative to academia, now maybe relative to the rest of the working world. But who are you talking about? Any thoughts on how their revolutionary rhetoric never seems to account for their lived conditions or practice except by way of the oblique references to contradictions, not being dismissive? I'm genuinely curious. This is disingenuous and incurious.
Tell them to genuinely come through.
That's what, no, and I don't, no, that invitation no longer exists. Dr. Carr, you need to bring me to your spaces. You've been here. You've been on my platform for years. For years. So you would need to bring me to your spaces and lay it out. Or don't even do that. Simply do as you have done with so many other people's books. Do an extended segment. Take my book, take the second edition coming this spring, and bust it up.
Oh my God.
Lay it out and explain how I'm just a revolutionary rhetorician full of contradictions. Do that, please, by all means. That is what I have only ever wanted. Someone of your caliber to take my work seriously and lay it out. If you could do that ridiculous review of Roland Martin's book, will you give praise, undue praise to that horrific text? Then you, by all means, in my abstention, take my work and rip it to shreds. Just do it on the record.
I think that's your answer though, right there.
That's it.
That's
all I have to say.
That's your answer though. If that review he gave Roland book compared to your book, you already know who got the battery and who's putting it in the back. So.
But I'm just saying, like all of this indirect talk that on YouTube comments, when you have my number, when you have been here, you know you could invite me somewhere or just lay it out. Just take my book and lay it out without me or anybody involved and explain the flaws, explain what I did wrong. It would be of great benefit to your audience. I would love it. But anyway, I'll come to Howard. I was just there the other day. Whatever. But stop doing this. This stuff is so, I know I joke around and I get called petty, but that is the real pettiness. That's trifling and petty and useless. Anti-intellectual. Oh, all right. Anyway, I see we got somebody doing real work. We got the good sister coming through. Let's cleanse this place real quick and come on back.
Let me light some stage. Let me light some stage.
Yeah, light some stage. I was like reading this, like all that energy, and you can't. There you go. Light some stage. We're gonna light some stage. Be back in a second. And like I said, anybody else, but at least do that. Yeah, and yeah.
Put it in the comments.
Back real quick in a second. All right, the space is being cleansed here on Earn Your Liberation. ML Smith is back in the building. What's going on? Welcome back. Diallo, Geechee, anybody want to bring?
Yeah,
I'll bring introduce our guest. Yes, please.
Diallo, you might have to get your headphones.
Yeah, I think you need the headphones, man. My man, you got.
But, so again, peace. We have Sister ML here again, and pretty much if you can lay out what is going on with Brother Raheem, the situation, and then we can kind of get into a dialogue.
Okay, you all can hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. All
right. Good morning. So, I am back, and I definitely appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you all this morning. In the last couple of months, my state has murdered two people and plans on murdering a third person on February 7th. And so we have just been in this, this cycle of death and just murder and destruction concerning our carceral system here. Specifically with Raheem's case, he has an innocence claim. And I want to say specifically, I was not there, right? So I can't say 100% that he is innocent. I do believe he is. I read all of the past motions, paperwork, etc., and I do believe that Raheem is innocent. But the point is, when a person has an innocence claim, it is incumbent upon our courts, upon our prosecutors, upon those who hold the power in that particular system to stop and review these things, because our system, first of all, is not perfect, and also it ain't broken. It's made like this, right? So people are wrongfully convicted. People who are innocent are in prison. People who are innocent are on death row. So we need to stop and really look at these cases, specifically when someone is condemned to death, because we cannot reverse death. So Raheem Taylor is on death row for the murders of his living girlfriend and her 3 children from 2004. He's always maintained his innocence, and records show that he was not here. He was actually in California. But once the authorities were able to confirm he wasn't here, that's when they start, their games, and they changed the times of death for the victims. They went from a day to a week before to 3 weeks before, because the week before he was gone, right? So they decided to change the time of death for the victims for 2 to 3 weeks prior, which would actually put him in this community. But initially, all of the reports said that the victims died within days of being found, and Raheem was not here. So, at the end of the day, that's the reality. They have proof that he flew out of this community. He was gone. And so he was not here. And they just took it upon themselves to condemn him for this crime, because he wasn't perfect. Many of us are not, right? Raheem sold drugs. He was, he had been in prison, so he had learned to do some things while he was incarcerated. And so they just felt like, okay, we're going to get you for this because you're a bad person anyway. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what's going on.
So tell me this: when we was as a think tank, we were studying and going over KJ's situation when the state brutally murdered him.
Yeah.
And I started looking through the documents of all the other people on death row, and Raheem was the one I clicked on. And I must admit, when I saw it, I was like, wait, a woman and kids? And I was I was feeling some type of way. And I think I asked you about it. But if you can lay out or explain, so you LaWanda Rowe, the sister of the deceased woman, she wants this man dead. She wants this man dead. There's a black woman dead. There's 3 black kids dead. And then there's this guy. And you have prison, death row, and these things. Could you kind of speak to or respond to someone who is on the position of defending this black woman who was murdered with her kids?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, because you know me, and those who know me, I am a advocate of children. Honestly, all the time I say, fuck adults, right? Because adults be on too much. But I defend babies. So the fact that I'm not saying that this was not a horrible situation, and we lost 3 children. They were 11, 7, and 4 years old. And so that was definitely a tragedy. And her family, the way that they feel, I cannot condemn or, feel any type of way about the way her family feels, because they lost their sister and they lost their, nieces and nephew, right? But I will say this: our police and our prosecutors, they manipulate families of victims to the extent to where they convince these people that things happened a certain way. And this case is honestly no different. I've looked into how the prosecutor spoke with 2 of the victims' relatives who saw her. These people spoke with her on the phone and saw her in person in those days where they say that supposedly they were deceased, right? According to their now case, they were deceased, but they were not deceased. They were alive. And 2 of her family members say they spoke with her. And a prosecutor sat them down and say, oh, you could have spoken to her that day because it's not in the phone records. But it was in the phone records. It actually was in the phone records that they spoke to her. But the prosecutor sat them down and tried to convince them that, they didn't know what they were talking about. They were thinking of another day. So they manipulated the phone records when they were in court to prove that these family members did not speak with her. But now we understand that they did speak with her those particular days, and a prosecution went about, basically manipulating them. So that's what happens with courts and prosecutors and police. They often manipulate the families of victims because these people are grieving, right? They're suffering, they're going through so much. And so they are very easily manipulated. And so that is what happened in this particular case. I did read where Miss Rose's sister did say that in the media. I've also read in the court documents where her other sister said, I not only spoke with her, I saw her. She loaned me $50. She was alive, right? And so in that particular sister's, we have her statement as well. So I just believe that there's so much grief and pain in this whole situation, and our courts and our prosecutors and our police, they manipulate the families in order to get the outcome they want, because they really don't care about justice for this woman and her children. It's always a notch in their belt to get their position, to get their next job, to become a judge or a captain or whatever. So they're not necessarily caring about this family. They're really just caring about making sure they get a conviction.
Yeah. So I was reading through some of the documents, and so Miss Rowe, the deceased, and her children, there was a brother who is the father of the 3 kids, and he has a sister, and the sister actually calls, the daughter, the older daughter who was killed, she calls the sister, sounds frantic, sounds nervous. The sister's asking what's going on in the background, and then the sister says somebody came in the room and make her hang up the phone, and she called her at 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock in the morning. Could you kind of speak to the type of evidence, something like that, and other evidence that leads to this brother possibly being innocent?
The reality is police get tunnel vision. We've all saw that happen, right? They latch on to a person or a story, and no matter what else they hear, they're not, I'm getting off of that story. So yes, the aunts of the children, the oldest child, who was 11, she called her aunt in the middle of the night. And like you said, there was, noise in the background. The little girl sounded very frantic. And the aunt told the police this story. She said, I talked to my niece in the middle of the night. Now, mind you, Raheem had left town the day before, so he was gone. And the police got this story from the aunt, and they did nothing with it. They didn't try to figure out who was the people in the background that had this child scared. Why was this child calling you in the middle of the night? They had latched onto Raheem because, again, Raheem was a bad person, and he'll tell you he's not perfect, right? Like I say, in the 80s and 90s, things were wild. And he was traveling the country, selling drugs and doing some other things. And so because he had that lifestyle, the courts and the prosecutor and the police decided he's guilty. And no matter what else we hear, we are going to focus on him. Like I said, not only did the aunt talk to the little girl, the sister of the victim saw her sister. She said, I just saw her. She loaned me $50. Not saying she told me she would. Cash App wasn't around back then. She saw her sister in person, and the sister handed her $50. And this is the time where the prosecution is saying the woman was dead. So either her sister's hallucinating, right, which is not the case, or they targeted someone for these crimes who is innocent, and they went about, manipulating the records, manipulating the family to get that conviction. So that's just what they do. They're going to focus in on one person, normally someone who is, poor, who doesn't have the resources, who also did other things in their life, and nothing is going to take them away from that. And that's really the sad part. Also, the sad part is, just want to say, Raheem was with Miss Rowe for several years, and he had, very strong feelings for her and the children. He was almost like a father figure, and he grieved after their deaths, but he really wasn't able to grieve because they soon arrested him. They soon, took his brother into custody and abused him. So over the last 18 to 20 years, it's been very difficult for him because he didn't go to their funerals. He wasn't able to do those things when you love someone and they pass away that you're able to do as far as that grieving process. So that was really stunted in his case.
So what are some stuff that you or not stuff, but what are you needing from people? What are you asking people? And is it going all the way to getting him out of jail because it's not a crime he committed, or like what's the process, or what's the ask?
Well, right now, our target, who we're focusing on, is our current prosecutor. In 2021, a law was passed in our state, and this law gives prosecutors specifically the power to reopen cases where people claim they were innocent and do a thorough investigation. I'm not asking for Raheem to get out of prison tomorrow. What I am asking is that our prosecutor utilizes the power that our legislator gave him last year. And first of all, ask the court to stop the execution for now, right? And to do a thorough investigation into the medical examiner's report about them changing the times of death, and into all of the other alibi witnesses that saw the victims. Actually do an investigation into these things. So that's what we're asking. We're not necessarily asking for him to be let go tomorrow, but there needs to be an investigation into the claims of he and also his family members who said that they saw her. So that is our ask. So our prosecutor, his name is Wesley Bell. You all know him from St. Louis, right? So Mike Brown Jr. was the big case here. And our prosecutor at that time was a horrible racist named Bob McCullough. And he was in office almost 30 years. So Wesley Bell ousted him. After Mike Brown in 2018, we got a new prosecutor. He's progressive. And I'm doing this because we know what progressive means. But he is supposed to be progressive, and he is supposed to be looking into past wrongs. So we are asking Mr. Bell to open up this case, to review it, to see that his predecessor, not only did horrible in the case of Mike Brown Jr., he had been doing horrible for 20 years before that. And so that is our ask right now. So we're asking our community to reach out to the prosecutor's office and to urge him to open up this case and review it so that Raheem actually gets justice. And that's what we're looking for in this case, justice.
All right, Diallo, Jared, when y'all got anything?
No, honestly, I don't. I'm just appreciative of your consistent work, and just want to echo again any welcome to this platform, to this show that we can offer, because I deeply appreciate that work. And I just a bit of frustration at hearing it, and and not knowing exactly what. Just a personal thing. I don't know exactly what to do. Like it's a frustration thing. So I definitely appreciate you coming through. Are there specific requests that you all are asking people to do? Links to share, things to sign, places to show up, and let's just make sure we get all that included too.
Okay, there are, and thank you for that, Dr. Ball. I definitely appreciate it.
And please call me Jared. Please call me Jared.
Listen,
please.
And I know you forget. Listen, you forget, right? And I don't know how this happened, because I don't know many Black people named Jared, right? But my son's name is Jared.
I know.
Yeah,
no, I do remember that, right?
So I got the name from the Bible, and I'm like, I thought I was the only. I'm doing something different, but like there are a couple other Jareds apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's funny.
The only other I got just years ago, I got sent to a private school, and the only other brother in the school had my name in the exact same spelling and everything. It was very strange. And then we both tried to flee that space.
Wow. Yeah. My son is also Jared. Yes.
Yeah. Right on. So we all, and he and I, we all reviving that name because it's taken a beating these last few years. So shout out to, Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But and also not only that, right? And just to keep it real, you went through a lot to get that doctor, that PhD. You did. You know what I'm saying? So I do try to respect that. That was not an easy task for you and the other Black folks who were in that space.
And Biden is still making me pay for it too. Damn it.
And Carr trying to take it away from you.
You trying to deny that I have one.
That's not. Hey.
Anyway,
that's okay. That's too funny. But so we are asking people to do some things. First of all, we have petitions on change.org. It's Justice for Raheem, and Raheem is his Muslim name. Raheem is his Islamic name, and that's what we respect. That he wants, to be called that. So that's what we do. But Justice for Raheem on change.org. Also, we are a small organization, right? There are two of us. People think that we have millions of dollars and we have an entire staff. No, it's me and my co-director. And so we really need people to support our work, to follow us, socials, MADPMO. I also say recently we changed our name. We are now Missourians to abolish the death penalty because I'm an abolitionist and we are trying to abolish this practice. And so we do ask people to follow our work, MADPMO, so Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We post, share what we're doing. We have what's called a toolkit, which has like captions. A lot of people don't necessarily know what to say, in these instances. So we have captions in the toolkit where you can post the caption, post a photo or a graphic that I've created. And the toolkit is a bit.ly Raheem toolkit. So if you go to our social media, you can find all of the information. Our website is also madpmo.org. So we really need, to amplify this work. We really need people to support what we have going on. We appreciate people coming out for Kevin 2 months ago. And yes, this state they did murder Kevin, and we're still grieving today. And we're really trying to stop this from happening to Raheem. So change.org/justice for Raheem and MADPMO on all social medias.
So tell me this, I think in basic organizing, anybody who's organizing or doing political education, people don't really get emotionally connected to causes unless it hit them in the house, And so I guess I want you to speak to, how you're doing in terms of, people after people that you're fighting for the state murdering them. And then the second part is I know we talked about this before, but could you lay out a little bit the whole concept of why you think the death penalty should be removed, including people who've done some horrendous things?
Mm-hmm.
But just go at those two.
Yeah. So first, people often ask me, how I take care of myself and how I, and honestly, every now and again, I just have to have a martini, extra dirty, right? Because it just takes that. But I have a good community of other organizers. I have some friends who are very supportive, that I can vent to. A lot of my work is behind the scenes and dealing with, attorneys and prisons and the administration. So it can be frustrating. But it's definitely not easy. Getting close to clients, and having these things happen. Kevin's case was very, was even more so emotional and hurtful because I got close to Kevin's daughter. He has a 19-year-old daughter. And still am, she's a beautiful young woman. And so being able to get close with them and having lost him is very difficult. I still have hard moments today. I've been to Kevin's gravesite and it's definitely not easy to even walk up there. But like I said, I have a good community and people around me, that are very supportive. And, my friend has a saying, we do this till we free. So, that's definitely what I'm on. So, regardless of how it hurts or what we're going through, we're going to keep pushing because those that came before us, they did the same thing. But as far as like the death penalty, Geechee, this state shouldn't be killing anybody. This government, I say state, this apparatus shouldn't be killing anyone. The fact that our government feels that it has a moral authority to decide that anyone needs to die or that anything was heinous enough, and they're not looking at the history of this country. I say all the time, the blood of my ancestors runs through this ground, and there should be several people who were executed because of what they did to indigenous folks plus enslaved Africans, right? And they have monuments, and and they have books and they have money, right? But because our people do things, and I'm not saying that there are heinous things that happen, but no one should be murdered by the state because the state should not have the power to murder anyone. And that's basically how I feel about, politically, how I feel about the death penalty should not exist. But also, as far as like, the way the system works, it's expensive. It's traumatic. It traumatizes the victim as well as the other person's family. Our government says they don't have money. We can't give kids a head start. We can't help families with medical issues. We can't do the things that we need to do in society, but we got $1 million to kill somebody. I don't understand how. Where do we get $1 million? And it costs about $1 million from the time of trial to a person's executed in this country. It's approximately $1 million to execute someone. Where we get $1 million for that at? But we can't You know what I'm saying?
I
You
mean,
have
that's the
universal-
same. I'm sorry, but that's the same for the daily cost of incarcerating somebody, if I remember correctly, right? That the cost of daily incarceration is way more than educating and housing and feeding them.
Exactly.
But
Yes,
yet
very much
the
so.
preference is always there. They, like you said,
Mhm.
there's always money for all of that. But when it comes to school, housing, education, food, healthcare, they're like, oh, we broke. We don't. We just don't know what to
Yeah.
do.
Anything to help people.
You know, and as you look at, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
perfectly.
good. Damn, I was having some issues earlier. As you look at the political climate in Missouri, I hear some undercurrents about Missouri's red state status could be in jeopardy. Josh Hawley is vulnerable. They got some, patriotic Marine type guy that claims he's going to challenge. Is there so as there is a liberal or even Democratic upswell against the Republican establishment in Missouri, do you have a list of local legislators, state legislators, and even other candidates that have committed to abolishing Missouri's death penalty, or at least putting a moratorium on death penalty? Is there a list of candidates out there who've made that public commitment?
So first, I'll answer your question about Hawley. This state is not in jeopardy of not being read. The person who just won the other Senate seat in our state is the person who sought to kill all my clients. Eric Schmidt was our Attorney General, and he's now the new senator, U.S. senator. So he spent Christmas with Trump. That's how MAGA he is. So this state is not in jeopardy of not being read. And the person who they're wanting to run against Hawley is Hawley Light. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Just the reality of the situation.
The Democrat.
So, yeah, he is technically, yes, but
Right.
I mean, yeah. So it's not in jeopardy at all. It's very much red. But yeah, we actually do have a lot of supporters on both sides of the aisle. Now, they haven't necessarily said we haven't had discussions in our state about a moratorium. What we are doing is chipping away at those issues where that leads to death penalty. Like those counties that are small and can't afford a capital trial, a death penalty trial, they changed the venue and they changed it to like St. Louis or Kansas City because those are bigger communities. We're trying to stop that. If you don't have your own money to put on a death penalty trial, you shouldn't be having one. So those are the things that we're trying to chip away at. And we do have supporters, like I said, on both sides. One of our Republican state members, last year, 2 years ago, they executed an intellectually disabled man. His name was Ernest, and he had the capacity of an 8-year-old child. And it was so horrible what they did to Ernest. This Republican has stood with us ever since. And he's pretty conservative, but he saw what happened. He's like, that's not okay. So from then on, he has been, filing bills to repeal the death penalty. They haven't been successful, but he is on our side. So we do have legislators on both sides of the aisle who are supportive of our work. We also have term limits, Diallo. So after 5-6 years, a person is termed out. It's a new crop of people that we have to talk to. But we believe that we are going to abolish the death penalty. I told my co-director, I'm gonna give myself five, maybe 7 years, right? And I need to do it within that time, or I'm going to feel like I failed. So I definitely think that the death penalty will be abolished in the state. It is a process of chipping away at how it happens, change the venues. It also happens. Our judges in Missouri have given 3 people the death penalty. A jury has, not been able to reach that verdict. And in 3 occasions, a judge said this person needs to be executed. And that's how the last person who was executed, Amber McLaughlin, that's how she was on death row, because the judge put her there. So we're also trying to take that power away from judges. So there are small things that we're trying to do that would actually chip away at what's going on. And then ultimately, we are trying to repeal the death penalty. And I do believe we will be successful.
So as I read through the documents, it's so much. It's almost, I hate to say that it's like a soap opera, but it's like so much shit that's going on. Like the brother, they forced the brother to said that he did it, and then he recant that, and these person recanting. My question is, what has been done in terms of presenting the evidence that he didn't do it, he wasn't there? Like, has that been argued in court already? And this is kind of like another time. Like what's that like?
So the way the court procedures work is when you appeal something, it had to have been brought up in court in a trial, right? You can't go to your appeal and talk about X, and X was nowhere in the trial. And that's the problem with the way things happen. Raheem's original attorneys were pretty incompetent, and they did not call several witnesses, including the person he was with at the time of these crimes. He was with his 13-year-old daughter. And they never called her. They never went to California to find her. They never brought her back here to testify. So now, and she's been since 2010 trying to say, no, my dad was with me. He was not doing this. They haven't been able to get her story in because in the original trial, the attorneys were incompetent in bringing her story forth. So that's been really the blocking, aspect of getting some traction in Raheem's case, because several things were left out of the original trial. So that's why we're asking the prosecutor today to reopen the entire case and to look at those witnesses, including his brother, who was not only abused by the police into confessing, but also had his mother threatened, but because our courts operate in a way in these certain rules and procedures, so now his daughter's statement has not been able to get in, since his attorneys were incompetent. Now it's a situation where, okay, our prosecutor can do this. He has the power to reopen the case, and that's what he needs to do. So that's what we're looking for right now. But yeah, it was soap opera is, putting it mild. It was so many pieces into what happened to him. And all of these cases, none of these things are cut and dry. It's always so complicated. And that's why we need to stop and review it. There is statistics that out of 8.3 people that are executed, one person is exonerated from death row. And since I believe the 1980s, we've exonerated 185 people from death row. So innocent people are condemned to death, and that's definitely not something that we should be practicing.
So I heard you correctly. You said 1 of 8.
Yes,
are
so
exonerated.
1 of 8 exonerated from death row. Yes. And
So,
that's just exoneration. We don't know how many innocent people they actually murdered.
I was just going to say,
yeah,
because I was going to say that I'm assuming part of what the process of exoneration is having the resources to find a team that's going to prove the case for you. That's going to that there is the exculpatory evidence that you need that hasn't been destroyed or hidden or just disappeared, or like you need a lot to make it happen. So in other words, if 1 of 8 are actually being exonerated, I think it stands to reason that many more, X many more, are actually innocent entirely and being put to death unfairly, unjustly, as if to the extent that anyone should be, to your point before. But anyway. That's wild. That's just wild. Anyway.
And we have a famous case of that. In 2011, the state of Georgia murdered Troy Davis. And, from day one, Troy maintained his innocence. And I believe he was innocent. But this state, and that's why I tell people, because when I tell people Raheem is innocent, people light up. It's like, oh, he's innocent. It'll be okay. He'll be let go, or he'll get his chance at court. I'm like, they kill innocent people. That's not a stumbling block for the system.
Chance in court.
Exactly. So they do murder innocent people. Just an example of the exoneration. I probably would say twice as many people are exonerated. That were exonerated, twice as many were actually killed. So this is an issue. And also, Raheem is not the only person on Missouri's death row. There are 18 people on our death row, and I know specifically 2 of them are innocent, and the third one possibly is innocent. We need to get into his case a little more. So this is not even rare, right? This happens often, that innocent people are killed in this country on death row, and killed period in prison. But yeah.
Well, I did make sure we have the at least the link to your website in the show description already, so people should follow up there. And by the way, my bad, everybody. We are slated to still have Doctors Asante and Dove at 9 o'clock per the promotion. So just I know I got all wrapped up in my other thing there. Forgot to mention that, but anyway, but in the remaining minutes that we have, is there anything else we want to make sure that we cover? Let's see, what is this question here? Can ML speak on people who have been exonerated but not released, like the Kamala Harris situation? Does that I don't know what that is in reference to. Does that mean anything to anybody?
You talking about something Kamala Harris did in California?
Yeah, maybe Comrade Kwame could.
Yeah, I don't know who she didn't. Yeah, I don't know who. I mean, she did a whole lot of wrong when she was AG of California, but I don't specifically know the case that he's talking about.
Okay.
But I will say, in wrapping up, and this particular death penalty work is just one aspect of what I do, and I'm thinking about when Geechee asked me about self-care. We do have wins, right? I have a friend who is wrongfully convicted. He's not on death row. He has a life sentence. And last month he's been in prison for 28 years. And last month we had a hearing in court. And I was supportive of him, and it's very likely that he'll be released soon. And so that's definitely a win. And so there are small wins. And I know, I'm thinking about it right now. I know Diallo is good friends with Ricky. So this is someone that Ricky knows. His name is Lamar Johnson. And Ricky was in court as well. So there are people who are innocent that are coming home, and we need to keep fighting for them. People don't understand how easy it is to be wrongfully convicted of something. They think, oh, you got to be doing bad or you have to be in a certain place. You could be laying in your bed and somebody somewhere else being accused you of something that you didn't have nothing to do with. And next thing you know, you're wrongfully convicted, like Ricky was. Ricky did 23 years. Lamar did 28. And so the people's entire lives are stolen. So one aspect of what I do is advocating for people who are wrongfully convicted, not necessarily on death row, but overall. And those small wins, give us some hope. So we are looking forward to Lamar coming home within the next couple of days, and to celebrate that and to keep fighting. And that's basically what's going on. And please, like I said, follow our work. People can follow me too on Twitter. I'm at where they do that at. But yeah, I know I talk a lot of stuff. But we are really trying to do grassroots advocacy specifically in Missouri. And we definitely need people's support.
Right on. Well, you're always welcome here, and I know throughout the platform. I just want to say thank you very much for the work, and appreciate it. Fellas, any parting words? Anything else before we?
Well, I appreciate being one who was born and raised in Missouri. I know what a environment that is to navigate. So you have my admiration and appreciation, to be on the front lines of any type of justice struggle in a state like Missouri. Not that the rest of the country isn't bad, but these Midwestern states have kind of escaped the stigma of the South, and people think, oh, it's the Midwest. It's just like wholesome heart of America type, but it is really, truly, as bad, if not much worse in many respects than the deep, deep South and the antebellum Dixieland areas of this country. So respect due to you.
Well, mother of Jared, thank you very much for coming through once again. Until the next time, we of course will say peace to you because we know you keep fighting for it. And right. Thanks again. Take good care.
Thank you all. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody, back here at Earn Your Liberation. We got a couple minutes, I think, before our guests show up. Anything we want to try to get to or come back to or refer to or
let Diallo play his little video, man. Since he
Lord,
since he crying, he up there crying in the beginning.
I don't know. It could be copyright strike. I don't know. It's just
now, which video is
the
this?
Lord put it on my heart this morning.
The one he group texts us. Let me see if I can.
Man, send it to me again or put it in this chat here, please, because there's a lot of messages flying around, and man, it's too many apps, man, between email and Slack and WhatsApp, and I can't keep up with everything. I got DMs and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
Hey man, y'all see Yo Gotti got Angela Simmons.
Yeah.
You know who Yo Gotti is?
Yeah.
I mean, I know who he is, but
you know that song? You remember that song?
Rap song?
It goes down in the DMs. Remember that song? It goes down in the DMs.
No. Oh, nah. Yeah. Maybe vaguely. I don't know.
He talked about getting Angela Simmons and he bagged her. So, brothers, take your shot.
I mean, it was a photo op. Do you really think they
go together?
It's a real couple. It ain't
that's what she
publicity.
I mean, I'm not mad at that. If you respectfully, I would think at least I'm way out the game, but I would think if you respectfully slide into someone's DMs and say, "Hey, I think you're interesting.
I
Can
don't
we
know,
have
man, because
is that? I don't know. I would think
it was
that's
trending. It seems like I've been hurt so many times. I've been fooled so many times with these celebrity couples. I think it's a true couple. I can hashtag goals. I can live vicariously through, and then I come
hashtag
and turn to
goals.
find out it wasn't real. It wasn't sincere. So I'm gonna give it a little time.
Man, Yo
This
Gotti
could
winning,
be a
man.
made-for-TV relationship.
He winning. He got the biggest artist in the game, and he got
It was
the
it's too Cinderella. It's too perfect for me. I don't think it's real love.
Oh,
Damn.
wow.
I think it's a PR stunt. But I'm jaded.
Did you send it to me?
I'm about to right now. I was trying to get it because Diallo be sending it in a group thing, and here you go. I haven't watched it now,
just so we can confirm. I just want to confirm that Professors Dove and Asante will be here at 9 o'clock. So rest assured. So don't let this moment of ridiculousness discourage or dissuade anybody from thinking that we're here to be serious today. I'm just assuming. I don't know what this is. I'm a little nervous, but here we go.
So now your new group.
The new human humanity.
Yes. What does that mean?
Well, it's a new way of looking at the human form. See,
oh man, you being corny, you being funny.
No.
Who is that?
You realize that, but I'm not black or colored or Negro or African American or Marini or high yellow or Creole. None of those labels that society places on us. See, I don't see color.
That's what they call you, Jared.
I look at people and everybody seems to be the same shade.
You sure it's not the glasses?
Yeah.
I'm just a human being.
Oh, I see what you're doing. You being funny. Okay.
How am I being funny?
You trolling our guests. I don't agree with this. Because this is what old boy was saying about this. Oh, it's PM Dawn.
That dude look familiar.
I actually like
like
PM
a
Dawn.
PM
I hate how y'all hate on
PM
PM
Dawn.
Dawn.
I'm just a human being. When I do is my shit not brown? It's a universal thing. We all flush
Wow.
out. Do you wipe? Do you look at the tissue? Most folks do. It ain't even an issue.
Who is this guy? He looks familiar.
He's an actor. I know he's been around. I don't know. He's not.
It's from a movie, Fear of a Black Hat.
But this is.
So don't act like you're superior.
Oh, this is Fear of a Black Hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. Okay.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah.
So it's a parody of PM Dawn.
It's definitely a parody of PM Dawn. But I feel like. Terrible.
I'm just a human. I'm just a human being.
Shame on you. News and the views I feel like in all seriousness, that's funny, but I think that's more of a I think you more siding with the critique of those who have chosen to now be critical of us as well. Because I don't share that critique of this particular work, as I'm sure we'll get into in a few minutes. I don't share that particular
Looking
critique,
forward.
but that's funny. Okay. And Fear of a Black Hat, shout out to the pre-woke critics of wokeness. Is that a fair assessment of that film? Like
No,
a pre-woke?
I don't
It's
think
like a pre-Hotep critique of the Hotep.
No, because I mean, actually, it's a critique of what would be someone called anti-woke or anti-Hotep. Remember, PM Dawn was criticizing KRS-One in Public Enemy. Remember, he was he thought that
you're right,
and he could move. So actually, PM Dawn, if they were here today, they'd be part of the anti-woke, anti-Hotep side of things.
Right.
They have transcended race. They transcended all the politics and low vibration attitudes.
So, but it's see, but this is where I think because woke was initially a legit call for Black people to be paying attention.
Still is.
Okay. Then there was this anti-woke backlash, which I think is a conservative critique of radical thought.
The Hotep, the Hotep.
And I think the same thing has been done with the Hotep. Like Hotep obviously originates not only linguistically, but out of a legit cultural, intellectual, political movement that in its bastardized form leaves itself open for criticism. So I think people who are critical of the Hoteps are critical of what I would consider to be the bastardized form of that legit lane of thought.
Well, even in its non-bastardized legitimate forms, it's worthy of and need of critique and criticism.
Okay, fair enough.
The difference is you have people who critique for the within the from the angle of trying to strengthen Black consciousness and Black militancy and Black politics, and you have people who critique from the angle of delegitimizing or hollowing it out. So, and that's both from the liberal and the integrationist and the white racist or the right wing. So, there's never been a time that any legitimate Black leftist, Black radical, Black Afrocentric would deny that this is above criticism and doesn't have many internal contradictions.
And since both our guests are here a few minutes early, let's honor that and get started. So let's take a quick break and we'll be back with our guests and get busy. Don't go anywhere. Let's go. So joining us in just a second here, and I'm very happy that this is happening, is first of all, Dr. Dove, who among many other things is a proud mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She has lived in Ghana, Nigeria, Canada, the US, and the UK. She graduated with a PhD from the US with a focus on African culture, women, and education, and has written articles, chapters, encyclopedic entries in 3 books, African Mothers, Afrocentric Education, and co-authored Being Human Being with Dr. Molefi Asante. Her accomplishments include her involvement in developing African-centered and Afrocentric models. Dove is an assistant professor of Africology at Temple University with a focus on African women, particularly mothers, education, and Africological episteme. And with her, of course, joining us momentarily is Dr. Molefi Asante, who, among many other things, is a professor in the Department of Africology and African American Studies at Temple University in Philadelphia. He has done so many other things. He has been one of the most widely referenced authors going back decades now, a founder of Afrocentricity, and again, a co-author of this book, Being Human Being. And we welcome him and Dr. Dove to the program. Good morning to the both of you. I should also add, Dr. Asante has the added honor of having his son teach with me at Morgan State University. So we could just add that list. Add that to the list. Anyway, Professors Dove, Asante, thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we 3 had engaged your work. So let me just back up. So first of all, as I said to you privately, I want to publicly apologize to you, Dr. Asante, for what I would have to say self-critically was a premature involvement in criticism of you and your work by someone who I happen to feel is an ignoble actor in all of this. So as we were saying, not that anybody's work is above criticism, but I just wanted to apologize for not having properly engaged you or that work before welcoming that criticism. So I was mistaken, and I just want to say that publicly to you here. Anyway, so I apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Now, so the 3 of us, my 2 colleagues here, we've gone through the book and offered a previous criticism. But so I would like to just start by having you both share with us from your points of view what Being Human Being is about, what you all are attempting to do there, maybe why the book, why now, and that, I'll let you lay that out for us before we go any farther.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Dove to give us her statement, if that's okay.
Well, Thank you, Dr. Asante. Of course, I just want to, say that I'm honored to be here. And Dr. Asante is a great mentor to many, as well as myself. And we collaborated on this book because we felt that our ideas crossed over, and that we could produce something that would speak to many people about some of the dilemmas that we find ourselves engaged in. And one of the main areas that we wanted to bring light to is that we wanted to step outside the race paradigm, which we've been using a European idea of who we are to define our humanity, and have a properly Africological understanding of who we are culturally, by not only recognizing that there is a way that we can define our humanity going back thousands of years into African ideas of what a human being is, but that part of our overall understanding of who we are is to make that cultural connection. And that would mean gaining knowledge from the source of African humanity and going back far enough to know that all people came out of Africa and that all our ancestors are African and Black. So we wanted to use that as a foundation for explaining many of the situations, contradictions, social structures that we are currently living in and reviewing, so that we had a better frame of reference to understand our own humanity outside the cultural construct of Europeans and Arabs. So we took a Jopian perspective. Is that okay, Dr.?
That sounds excellent to me. And if I may just simply add a thought here, that George Floyd's murder was one of the things that precipitated this for both of us, because the murder of George Floyd indicated that there was something operating within a society that was not necessarily offered as being visible, but yet it exists almost in every sector, as Dr. Dove has said, in everything, in all interests. So the killing of a Black man on television was a part of that race paradigm, that basically Black people are non-human, or in fact, not only non-human, but inferior to other humans. And so something that would not happen to other humans would happen to a person who has been defined as Black, and defined as Black by virtue of a race paradigm that sees white people as superior. This is what we called in the book the racial ladder. This racial ladder operates as it's an invisible thing in some senses. We see the results socially and economically and politically, but ultimately the situation is in the mind of the person. So you see a Black person and you see a white person and you're a white policeman, and you operate differently depending on what you conceive or what you perceive the other person to be. This is the thing that constantly exists, and it exists so deeply that it permeates even among people who are classified by it, sort of internally within those of us who are defined as Black. That we have it with the color. People say, well, there's colorism. No, there's not colorism. It's all the same racism. It's the same notion that has been developed by the idea that race exists. Race does not exist. There's one human being, Homo sapiens. And if you are a Homo sapien, your origins are African, regardless of what your complexion is, your whatever, you are an African. And so the question is, how do you change a paradigm that has been cemented for the last 400 or 500 years by Europeans and by Arabs to show inferiority and superiority based on this notion of race? How do you get out of that? And that's what we were looking at. And we looked at that and we said, the real fundamental problem, and now I'm thinking, as I'm talking now, I'm thinking that there may have been a more subtle issue going on here, that since Africans are the origin of Homo sapiens, and we are at the very beginning, one way to subvert that is to claim that Africans are not even Homo sapiens, that in fact we are so inferior, so non-human, we can't even claim that our DNA is at the very beginning of humanity, you see? So what we tried to do is go back and I don't think it's, I really don't, I think that Dr. Dove and I could have written probably 500 pages more on this, because what we discovered very early was that if you go to the oldest documents in the where you're having people look at the question of color, that color itself at a very early beginning in human writing and human history began to take on this notion that there was some distinctions that could be made between those who had conquered and those who had become those who were conquered and those who were the conquerors. And this, of course, we looked at particularly with the Indian subcontinent, with a caste system. Isabel Wilkerson had written a book, you remember, on caste, but about the same time as we were writing, but ours took a deeper, I believe, a whole deeper examination of it. We thought she was very light on that question of caste, that it had to be a much deeper discussion of that. And that's what we went into and began to look at the documents, particularly of Dr. Carr on the annihilation of caste, which is one of the great books in the world. And I don't know why people really don't relate to it or use it more. And many of those things were very useful to us.
Yeah, I admit my ignorance about that work myself. I have to acknowledge that. But and my issue with Wilkerson is something that I would want to raise with the both of you is around the issue of class, not caste. But
Right.
but I'll stop there. The Geechee Diallo, do you all want to raise the first question before I get? I mean, I have my list. I'm sure you have yours. But let you all go.
Yeah, well, so I'll save one of my class conversations for that too. But so initially, when I was looking at the House of Race versus House of Humanity, and I think early in the book you laid out that racism, white hegemony, patriarchy is also equivalent to hierarchy, and then in the back they was talking about like relational hierarchy. My question is, are there any forms of natural or non-parasitic hierarchy that you think there's out there or that is good for culture, or do you say hierarchy in every form is not something that we need to exist in?
Geechee, you really ask.
There are natural hierarchies.
Go ahead, Doctor.
There are natural hierarchies just in the sense of age and accomplishment. If we're looking at an African traditional understanding, so your age is very important because it is possibly a sign of wisdom and knowledge that will be handed down, and one is preparing to become an ancestor. And so there's a spiritual aspect of it, that you revere those who have the knowledge upon whose shoulders you stand. There's that type of natural hierarchy. But many of the hierarchies that we're dealing with are just cultural constructs and are not real. Those ones based on superiority and inferiority, which include class, as well as the idea of the inferiority of Black people, the darkest skinned Black people, women, children, elders, can all be considered in opposition to the African way of looking at things, if we go back to a traditional model. So I think one of the most important natural ones is the age one.
Yeah, I accept that. The thing is that for me, and I think for us as we were writing the book, what we saw was that that domination was the first terror, and whether that domination came from a male oppression of a female, or a man's oppression of woman, that oppression itself, that domination itself, gave a whole new meaning to social relationships in the world. And that if you don't deal with the question of domination, and we always said, and we teach at Temple, our graduate students, that what Afrocentricity is, most of all, is a critique of domination. And so if you're going to critique domination, one of the ways that you have to begin to look at is that these natural forms of hierarchy were under attack almost at the beginning by the race paradigm. Because one of the things that, for example, the missionaries did when they went to Africa was to teach young children the Bible or the Quran. If they were Muslims, they taught them the Quran, taught them the Bible, and the children became the buffers between the conquerors and the masses of African people, because as far as the conquerors were concerned, the children had merit above the elders. And you get an internal conflict already in the society, because the natural hierarchy no longer matters when a child can stand before an audience of elders and say, according to the Bible, according to the Quran. And the elders have only the traditions of their ancestors and the proverbial wisdom that comes from thousands of years. But in the new formation, you see, they had created this notion that only the people who have the special knowledge that is given to you by the conquerors, that's the only knowledge that matters. So there's always been these battles between this notion of this race paradigm asserting itself as being the major paradigm that we have to deal with. And I think that this whole question of, in the house of what we call the house of race and the house of humanity, our thing is that the house of race is where you find the killing of Black people, the abuse of women. You find the abuse of people because of gender, the abuse of people because of class. You find all of that stuff in the house of race. And so to get rid of that, we say that there has to be some notion of dismantling the entire structure based on the ranking of people, where white people at the top and you go down and Black people at the bottom. That's in the minds of the Africans, the Asians, the Europeans. The Europeans have been successful at insinuating this into everything. So everywhere you look, in the university, it's the same way. It's the same structure. And you go and say, it's in the church. It's the same structure. The Pope is white. Everywhere you go. And the struggle has always been, how do we get people to see that Homo sapiens began in Africa, and we know that the scientists have said DNA, all DNA of all the people in the world, 8 billion people in the world, goes right back to Africa, to one African woman in East Africa 300,000 years ago. That's where we all came from. So then how the hell did it get like it is now? The only way it got like it is now is because there was a deliberate attempt to enforce this notion, this false notion, that there were racial differences that were not just that you could look at color and also from color you can say the mental behavior is going to be different, the physical behavior is going to be different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They created the system. I mean, I was just reading yesterday about Hitler. I was reading the speeches of Hitler, right? And the critique of the speeches of Hitler. That's what he did. We now talk about the Jewish race. Who gave us the notion of the Jewish race? Hitler. Before that, Jews talked about religion. Jews he made the Jews a race, and he made the Germans believe that their race was superior to the Jewish race. But he created this notion. And this notion, you see, this notion is the same that it happens to African, to people of African descent. They created this notion. And then somehow what is happening now, I'm sorry to take so much time, but what's happening now is the breakdown of this notion because we have challenged it in every walk of life. I tell people I grew up in South Georgia. I was a cotton picker. I was a tobacco harvester. I grew up in the fields. So I come from the peasant population, right? So I'm seeing everywhere a challenge to this notion of white superiority. And I'm looking and I'm saying they ain't superior to nobody. There's no way to it. So how did it happen? I mean, what happens when we demonstrate in every sect of society, whether it's in science, whether it's in law, whether it's in politics, whether it's in gymnastics, that there is no superiority of one race over another, you see? So that is what is troubling to the white community, is that all of a sudden, this structure that they created for 400 years is breaking down.
Right. So I got one more question real quick. So I want to ask this question, and it's going to lead to a question later on when we get to class. So studying John Henry Clark, studying yourself, Amos Wilson, Marimba Ani, I've landed at this conclusion that the education is a culture defense mechanism. And the culture that most institutions, if not all institutions in the US, is building on European expansionism. And so when you got schools and universities, that's pretty much what the culture is teaching. So my question is, because you guys made a statement, and again, this is going to relate to Foucault, my question about Foucault later. But you made a thrust in the book about modifying schools' curriculums. And I'm curious how you see going in institution whose culture is European expansionism to modify the curriculum in a way that it will confront U.S. imperialism or white pathology. Like, I'm curious how you see that.
Well, Dr. Dove has written the Afrocentric School, which is one of her major books. So you want to take the first stab at that?
Yes, well, the Afrocentric School, and I don't know if you've seen it, is really based on all the teachings of, people like Amos Wilson and so on, all the, Asa Hillier, Dr. Asante. It's a compilation of their ideas because first of all, the idea of education is one that is culturally grounded. And so we grow up in a system where education really is a way of schooling, which Dr. Mwalimu Shujaa was famous for writing the book, Too Much Schooling, Too Little Education, a paradox of Black lives in white society. And he really followed on from, I forget his name for the moment, but his teaching was that we're being culturally schooled into becoming the people that we've been constructed to be. And so the education is a cultural experience where one would grow to understand who one is, and in that way have a mission about what one could possibly do in the world. So the book is really based on the concept of education from an Afrocentric perspective. And really it just looks at the scientific accomplishments of ancient Africans and looks at, the types of ideas and beliefs that came out of that as a sort of foundation. It's theoretically grounded also in the idea that Africa is the home of humanity, and it has examples of curriculum in it. So as part of the Afrocentric school movement, the African-centered school movement, I was engaged in that in the UK and in the US, and really founded the book on the already existing teachings, if you like, in the schools, in the African-centered and Afrocentric schools that arose here very powerfully at one time. And so it follows that, but what's different about it is that it's culturally grounded. And it is, it's there. The curriculum from the preschool to about 15, and it's based on research that was done in Ghana, which looked at the children and their accomplishments from before birth to around 10. And so it's grounded research. It was a baseline study carried out by UNICEF, but I was empowered by my line manager to choose the types of questions. And so I did an Afrocentric baseline study because I was the person, the senior consultant. And so I wanted to do it from the idea of what already exists for African people. So it was done in areas where there aren't European schools, or they're looking at possibility of what type of school would be appropriate. So the research really looked at things like healing. When do children learn about the plants and their, how they can be used for medicinal purposes? The types of things like when they go to the market to sell things, so that they have great mathematical prowess, but when they go to school, they fail in the school system and so on. So that kind of research was the background of the book. And the curriculum is there so that people can look at it based on accomplishments of African children throughout these years, and then they can use it themselves to create from the curriculum there as the baseline, that build upon the logic of that. So that is looking at education from the vantage of becoming human, knowing ourselves, and providing information and knowledge even to the people that were part of colonization and were leaders in challenging colonization, leaders in challenging enslavement, and and then ancient principles of art, and the types of that type of book anyway. So I hope that helps. I hope I'm making sense.
For me, that helps. And I was looking around. You saw me looking around. I was looking around. I have a copy of your book somewhere in my office, but I cannot find it. I wanted to.
Oh, I have one here if you would like.
I just wanted to show them the book, Afrocentric School. But
well, I could get mine if you like and show it to you.
Good thing to show them. But while you're doing that, I also just want to say this in response to the question. The way I look at the hegemonic role of the United States government and the projection of the notion of white supremacy is that it may very well be the hegemon, but it is not limited now as we think of. That's the book, Afrocentric School, which is came out last year, a year before last. Very, very powerful book, very beautiful book. So she went to look. Somebody, I guess Jared.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. While I just want to at least have something to show. But yeah.
She'll see it. All right, but well, you see, Jared already has it up, Dr. Dove.
I see.
So, okay.
Thank you.
But at any rate, the thing is that the U.S. is a hegemon of this hegemonic notion of white racial domination, and also perhaps the leading edge of what we have been talking about. And so when you start talking about how do we challenge it and what the challenge is, a couple of years ago, I told somebody I was invited to the Institute of African Studies at the Russian Academy of Sciences. So I was in Moscow talking with Russians about what the Russians intended to do in relationship and in response to Africa. And when I left Moscow, I had the impression that the Pan-European Academy that we see the United States as being the hegemon for is actually worldwide. So it's not just that we challenge the U.S. We've got to challenge the hegemonic notion of white racial domination everywhere. That's our deepest challenge as African intellectuals and workers who are working in the interest of trying to bring some rational thinking to the world. Is we've got to tackle this issue of how the Pan-European Academy spreads itself in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in the United States, in the historically Black colleges and universities, everywhere. It's that battle is a universal battle. And when we engage in that struggle, we're engaged in dismantling the racial paradigm. That's my struggle. That's the struggle that I see myself engaged in every day. Undermine, to dismantle the racial ladder that has been created to in a way separate people and to make people assume that some are inferior and some are superior. That is not you can't do that by just attack. You can attack the hegemon, but you've got to also understand that the hegemonic role of the United States is now international. You have to attack Saudi Arabia. You know what I mean? You did the people in Libya and Mauritania and Sudan who enslaved Black people. The blacker you are, the more you can be a enslaved person in those countries. Those are African countries. You see, that's a hedge, and that thing was brought to Africa. That's not a natural way that Africans organize their societies. There was no slavery in Africa. before the Arabs and the Europeans. There's no evidence of that. So this is a whole different story that we've got to deal with.
Go ahead, Diallo. Yeah, go ahead. Although
very
I feel like that last comment was kind of controversial, but go ahead. Go ahead, Diallo.
No, Jared, as I said it, I said to myself, well, maybe if people go back and say, well, what about the Egyptians and the Israel? I don't know. I mean, but
no,
the
I
point, but the point,
go ahead.
But the
Diallo,
point,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but the point, but no, I understand. I mean, it's a good point that you're raising, because I want to be careful on this. But let me just say this, that there is no place in Africa where slavery was the principal mode of production before the rise of European and Arab enslavement of Africans. It was not the principal mode of production. Nowhere.
Yeah, I didn't mean that. I was just making a little. Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Diallo. My bad.
Okay. Sorry. That's a lot of layers here. I have to say, just to for full disclosure, I am a race man, and I adhere to the ideology of race first, and I accept the reality of races and racial distinctions between peoples and populations.
Most of the
but
people
what
know that are like
yeah,
that.
that's where
right.
And okay. So having said that, there are many concepts here and arguments in the text that I feel that we have to speak to. One of the ones that has been repeated several times here and articulated in the text is this what I think is a fallacious notion that all humans came from Africa. Because when we look at the archaeological records, unless we simply define Africa as solely a landmass and nothing more than a landmass, we can't argue that humans came from Africa, because as we understand, and as I've learned from you over the decades, Dr. Asante, that Africa is more than just a landmass. It is a conglomeration of cultures, of identities, of worldviews and philosophies. It is a history of interactions and relationships and very concepts. And many of the people that we would call white or even Asian or East Indian, they were not there during that, what is called, which I learned from Marimba Ani, the Asili, the cultural matrix or the cultural germ seed. They were not there for that. So if they were not part of that, if their lineage does not go back to that, we know that other cultures, languages, human relationships, worldview, and identities were evolved, came out of other regions. So yeah, humans came from a particular landmass, but that landmass was not identified as African, and those people are not identified as African. So I don't understand what we can gain from this notion of articulating over and over that the human primate evolved from Africa, which I know respectable archaeologists or scientists or geneticists would argue that. But if we go beyond simply the biological evolution of the human primate, once we get into culture, identity, history, relationships, how is that even relevant? Because we have many cultures, relationships, and structures that are absolutely not just alien to Africa, but hostile, innately hostile to the very existence of those cultures and African people. What is the relevance of we all came from Africa?
Go ahead, Doctor, and then I'll come up.
Yeah. The thing is that humanity can be linked scientifically. The birthplace can be linked scientifically to Africa, and people migrated to all parts of the world and formed their own cultural interpretations of reality, but all left basically with similar ideas, which is what we're arguing. part of what you're saying is part of the evolutionist concept of humanity, that we started as ignorant forms of humanity, or we were monkeys, and then we became, over time, we're becoming more and more civilized and understanding of what we are. And, you know, even we take a Jopian perspective on this, which Marimba Annie does as well. That's why her work is so great, because she uses Diop, like the rest of us do, to understand culture. And she focuses on culture, and her work is brilliant. What evolutionist ideas have led to is the idea that in these different parts of the world, completely different forms of humans grew that were genetically different. Well, scientifically, we are genetically 99.9% the same. So we're not actually different. So what because we're all human, whichever parts of the world that we've landed in and grown and developed our own ways of thinking. But from a Jopian perspective, there are only two cultures, theoretically and conceptually, that exist. And that is one where the mother and the father, the woman and the man, the male and the female, have a reciprocal relationship with each other, from which Art arose, the idea of balance, truth, honesty, reciprocity, harmony, and so on. These types of principles which we use to say as a foundation for understanding that acting upon those, one can become human. That is finding one's highest level of humanity, which we know that ancient Africans practiced. And we have Kemet as the classical place because it's all written and so on. But I think they're called polygenicists, believe that there are the several, the 5 racial types that grew in different parts of the world. And we challenge that genetic idea because we're not genetically different. What we're doing is following Diop's logic, which is that we're culturally different. These are the major things. So you've got the one of reciprocity and the one of the domination of the female by the male. That is looking at Job's picture. And then you will see the reflection of that in the Southeast Asian religions, where the male is dominant over the female, and, in the classical Christian idea of reality. And they all talk about really the first woman, who is an African woman, and she committed the first crime or sin against humanity by being immorally bankrupt. And she is the mother of humanity. That's the Black woman, the African woman, and the father is the man, the African man, whose punishment, certainly in the Judeo-Christian Islamic belief, is that he committed a crime against his father, and that all Black people will be damned and they will all be enslaved to the other people of the world. So, there are these ideas that merge together once you start looking at differences relating to skin color and genetic differences. So we can actually find evidence that you could take a Black person and train that person to be a European or an Arab and believe in his or her own inferiority and believe the ideas of those people and practice them and actually go out there and conquer other Black people and hate other Black-skinned people. This we know. It's not a genetic thing. It's a belief system. It's a way of thinking about the world which influences your action in the world. So, you know, what we've tried to look at is the knowledge part of culture, is that if people have knowledge about their human ancestry, they can then tap into that sort of cultural, spiritual aspect of themselves outside the construct, which is telling them, you must just trust, don't ask questions. And, you know, in some of these ways, we've been influenced in America, everywhere in the world, as Black people, to believe things that aren't true. And one of them we say is race, because it's the belief that we're given is that there is this hierarchy beginning with the white man and woman on the top, the yellow, the red, the brown, the black. And the woman is inferior in each of these in the construct that we've been given and taught every day when we go to school, look at pictures, read and follow the media. And that this construct here is the one that we all go by, we all use, and we all believe. And we're trying to say that that way of viewing ourselves is alien to our own humanity. It makes us believe in these things and act out, you know, so we'll go with the conquerors, and the conquerors can disappear. There could be no white person on the planet, and our idea of future and success and evolution and the notion of development will be based on these teachings. So it wouldn't matter whether we're whatever color we are. If we've been taught this, we will work out, we will develop a future based on the one that we're being held in, imprisoned in. And the idea is to kind of release our minds from these ideas and develop, because if we look back in terms of evolution, it's African people who were the civilizing force. This is proven and true to be the case, you know, and it didn't matter if we look at Ma'at and the idea of reciprocity and the idea of male-female balance, man, woman, mother, father. If we look at Ma'at, we will see that it could only exist in this kind of environment, and that idea is much, much older than these modern ones that we're using, you know, that include race and hierarchy and all these things. You will be judged on what you bring to the table. You will be judged on your life, on what you do to improve life. This is why the ancestors are so important to us, because you only remember the good ones. You can't be an ancestor if you haven't brought good into the world. Absolutely. We can be physically ancestors, but those who are evil will be forgotten eventually. Those who are good are the ones who are part of the process of developing in a different future, but it's ancient futures like and I've forgotten his name, but he's
Wayne Chandler.
Yeah, Wayne Chandler. Yeah. I was about to say,
that's what we're doing.
And it sounds like we agree. You can't, you know, there's a difference between old and elder.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
That's that Baruti line.
Well, that's right. That's wow, and that's a wonderful analysis, Dr. Nadal. I was just thinking as you were speaking that the reason, I guess, the best thing, I guess, for a person who is engaged in the life of sort of thinking about these things is to always know that there's nothing wrong with coming from one particular place of thinking and going to another. I mean, it's a very, very interesting. I was just thinking about all these things. The reason I say that is because when I was young and was deep into socialism, I went to Zimbabwe to live. And after living in Zimbabwe, I came back and I said, well, I'm really a real radical African culturalist. But and the reason I'm saying that, Brother Diallo, you pronounce it instead of Jallo, or Brother Diallo, is because when you say you're a race man, I know about that because Henry Louis Gates told me he was a race man. And somebody told me that Clarence Thomas once said he was a race man. So it was clear to me.
That's messed up, Dr. Asante. You taking shots, man.
I'm just hopping. I'm hopping.
That was a two-piece, Doc.
I'm hopping into it. I'm hopping into it because I said if Clarence is a race man, then what Clarence is actually talking about is I'm a black man. My thing is that that when you look back, we can say yes, I'm a. If people say, are you a black person? I say yes, I'm a black person. But actually, before 70,000 years ago, Brother Diallo, before 70,000 years ago, everyone in the world who was Homo sapien was black. There was no distinction. The differentiation between humans occurred after the migration out of the African landmass. That is science. Now we can argue, people can argue and say, no, I don't believe that, and I do believe in polygenesis. No, but this is scientifically correct. And that's why it's scientifically correct when we argue that DNA, according, and there are articles on this. Brother Shamaka Kieta has written on this, but not only Kieta has written on it. You can go back and see the 1984. There were whole articles done on 147 placentas of women. They looked at the from all over the world, and they traced the origin of the DNA to East Africa, to a woman in East Africa. So all humans. I mean, and Spencer Wells' work on the human family tree. The human family tree is everywhere. It's scientific work. One can argue. I have a lot of arguments with a lot of people who just argue. I don't argue emotionally. I'm a rationalist, and I'm a deep scientific rationalist. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I can't argue any other way. So when I look at the fact that when human beings, Homo sapiens, the only Homo sapiens, I'm not talking about primates. I'm not talking about hominins like Homo erectus. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about Neanderthals. I'm talking about Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens are only about 300,000 years old. The Earth is 5 billion years old, which means that the Earth was here before modern humans were here. And when the Earth was here 5 billion years, we were not here. And when we are gone, the Earth will still be here. So human civilization, Homo sapien civilization may disappear, but the Earth will remain, you see? So when you talk science, you understand that when Homo sapiens left the continent of Africa and went into Asia and went into Europe by isolation, by various other means, people became differentiated. But even on the continent of Africa, before we left, we became differentiated. In Africa, you have over 3,500 languages, which means 3,500 different groups of people. And all these people, this is differentiated. No African is like, you can't say that there's not differentiation inside Africa. You see what I'm saying? So this differentiation in Africa means that the African people knew that there were Africans who spoke different. After a few hundred years, they knew that somebody else had left the group and gone 100 miles away, set up a whole different family, created a whole different language, and so on. They knew that there was difference. What we are saying and what we argue in our book, Being Human Being, is that that difference did not relate to ranking of humanity into inferiority and superiority. That's what we're saying, that Africans recognized that people were different. Some were taller than others. The Twa were shorter than others. The Tutsi were tall. But they didn't say because you are tall, you are superior, or because you speak this language, you are inferior. They didn't do that. That was not right. That was something that was done when Homo sapiens left the continent of Africa and went elsewhere. And then after that, people began to develop these notions about, well, these are the other, and these are this and that, and so on. But ultimately, and what we have to do is to dismantle that thinking. That's
I have to say, there was a long-standing mythology that Europeans had, that they articulated that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and that the original human beings were white. And when their own archaeologists and scientists discovered that original human beings, as you articulated, were not white, it did not change them in their relationship to other races in the least bit. This historical contributionism, which I learned from Dr. Amos Wilson, where Black people pointing to our past contribution to our modern oppressors and our modern enemies, thinking that that will in some way amend their attitudes and interactions with us, has been a very long-standing fallacies where we've had decades of uncovering the truths of our history, the truths of our grandeur and our antiquity and what we accomplished in antiquity, and it has not moved our oppressors. My main point is saying that I don't understand the relevance of stating that humans evolved from Africa and original humans migrated from Africa. I do not see that as being something that ties us all together. I do not see that as anything that moves the colonizers, oppressors, and enslavers of African people to engage us any differently. So I'm not sure in this from an archaeological, from a geneticist standpoint, it is relevant, it is very interesting, but from a political, economic, and sociological standpoint, I'm not sure why we hammer that. And another point where there is a lot of emphasis on as if these issues were birthed out of race, like when the concept of race has been imposed on humanity, which is the label we give to the various phenotypical and ethno-cultural differences. We call them racial. That is the label we give, as if this was born out of these distinctions. But have we not seen, when there has been any absence of any racial distinctions, that Europeans and other races or other populations and cultures have imposed those same behaviors on each other in absence of color distinctions? Was there not slavery, genocide, unrelenting warfare, lynching, mutilation amongst white people, amongst other white people? So how is erasing or redefining the distinctions between human beings, as some calling it something other than race, or ignoring or being racially blind, how is that to speak to the current power dynamic and relationships? To me,
okay.
And I'll wrap it up.
Can I just say,
it appears that Black people and African people and the Black race trying to say, hey, we're going to move beyond race, while the rest of the world is sinocentric and orienting around their racial identities, seems to make us very vulnerable and further dilution of an already disunited people.
I just want to just squeeze in a similar feeling that I had reading this book, that it seems to be a departure, Dr. Asante, from your previous work. And in terms of, if I'm hearing Diallo correctly, I feel like we may agree a little bit here that I felt like this book Not that you're making necessarily a factually incorrect point, but that the focus of the book seemed to be addressing itself to an audience beyond Black people, beyond trying to it seemed like this book is attempting to enter a mainstream conversation, which may be leading some to conclude the way Diallo is, and some others to conclude, myself even a little bit, that some of that initial nationalist, race first, Afrocentric approach is
socialist,
lost a little bit. Well, I would like more socialism, but anyway, go. So I just wanted to start
to be a socialist.
Right. Well, anyway, so
I'm gonna let Dr. Dove speak, and then I'll
I want to say that the reason that we're stepping outside, one of the major reasons of stepping outside the race paradigm and highlighting culture, is to show that these distinctions, and I've touched upon Job, which Marimba Ani and others have used to find a window of enlightenment, that there are only really two cultures, one that is balanced and one that is hierarchical, and these are the differences among people, because you can look amongst people and you will find that the domination one is the one about domination, about aggression, about war, about individualism, about materialism, about profit, all these types of things inside the hierarchical one. That is the foundation of the concept of race and class and all these different other kinds of hierarchies, which are all constructs. So the idea of using culture is to say, in the terms of what Diop is trying to say, is that it is possible for these different phenotypes to change, that it is possible that human beings can change. And the key to that change is knowledge. And knowledge is the key to enlightenment. So if there is no contradicting information and knowledge based on truth for people to look at, then they're always inside this structure where we're being forced through conquest, through the murders of hundreds of millions of African people and other people too, but hundreds of millions of African people, which is what our focus is on, and the justification of that. So we look theoretically at, if we follow the European idea or the Arabic idea of the race construct, and where do we go with that? It's always about war, it's always about conquest, it's always about domination. This is what the race paradigm gives us as a choice or an opportunity to progress. We must always murder people. We must always take everything they have. We must always live off the things that they have created. We must always deny their humanity. We must always use hatred to move forward. That is the race paradigm that we've been given, so that we will all stay separate and we will all see ourselves as these different races. We are just merely phenotypes of a human race. And you cannot just use that as a way. You can use it as a model. It is being used. We've all used it, but the thing is that we're trying to step outside those constructs and say that there is an African construct.
That's right.
Which is much older and is much better and much more in keeping with the values and the beliefs, and that we can use them to have a different type of world. And it's not just about peace and love and embracing people. That's a very reductionist thing. It takes away the enormity of what we're dealing with. So it's not to say that race doesn't exist in terms of its manifestation, because it surely does. We're all inside it, suffering from it, and those of the darkest skin are the most vulnerable to death every day and enslavement. And that's exactly what's happening in all these different parts of Africa and the world. So that is a truth. And wars have to happen to stop those things wherever they are. The point is about a new vision for a different future and dismantling these ideas which have been imposed and taught through murder, through rape, through insanity, through war, all these things. These are in our head as if they're norms. And so they do feel logical, but it's not logical from an Africological perspective, looking at the ancient norms, that you just need to destroy the world, you know, and the race paradigm really, that's the evidence you can see from when it was constructed, the murder, the people that have been wiped off the face of the earth, not to say those who are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. How can we use that white supremacist distinctions to then use the same model that we're living in to use that as a future that we aspire to? The greatest thing that we can be is Europeans or Arabs. And that is not good enough, because we've been greater and we can become greater. And all people are being given ignorance and lack of knowledge. So it's not just we, Black people, it's all people are being given false information, and all people should know truth. And the hatred of people, just, you know, you are Black and hated, no logic to it, no logic.
But there's also no logic to the idea of Black supremacy. So we don't seek that either. There's no logic to that.
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah, the race paradigm itself is a dead idea, and it should be dead. Now, one thing I wanted to say to Brother Diallo, that we didn't talk about historical contributionism. I mean, and the reason that we didn't talk about historical contributionism in this particular book is because we recognize that, you know, identifying that Black people have done this, Black people have done this, Black people have done this. We recognize that we've done that. We've been through that, because out of the race paradigm, that's what we had to do. Mary McLeod Bethune said that. Dessalines said that if we could just show them that we built the pyramids, if we could just show them that maybe they would change, and maybe that's not, because that's not the issue. That's not what they dealing with. That's the issue, is that in the minds of Europeans, in the minds that they have put in our minds, because they put it in Black people's minds, there is this notion of white superiority and Black inferiority. That has to be dismantled. If that is not dismantled, we will not get anywhere. We can be deep and deep into Blackness. They can be deep and deep into whiteness, and we will never destroy this notion that the classification of races, which is this is a false concept. That's what we've been saying. The classification of races that was started in the 1700s, or maybe a little before 1600s, with creating these notions of Blackness and whiteness, and in between different other classifications. The people who set that up were not Black people. We wouldn't have set it up a classification where we were at the bottom, put ourselves at the bottom. White people who started is all Nordics and Aryans are at the top. American Indians, meaning Native Americans, and indigenous people and Africans are at the bottom. People who created that system, they carried that out in every sector of society and in every interest that they had. political, economic, and everywhere. That was the system. So that's why we went to culture with Sheikh Anta Diop's notion of culture, because we felt that African culture was being diminished in our own thinking. So we're fighting this notion of what we call racism. Racism is real. Racism is real, but race itself is a false concept, a created concept for classifying and categorizing. But in biological terms, it is not real. So we understand that. So that's our big thing. So African culture, we understand, and we promote African culture. And I want to say one thing about my work in my past, in my own self. I've written 100 books. So if you go through my books, you will see that all the stuff that you were talking about, yeah, I've done all that. And I believe, and what I stand by what I've written. However, in most of those books, I should say, because there are some things that have changed. But in most of those books, I stand by what I've read. But here's the thing that I think we need to point out, is that even so, when you understand the question of how we move in society to create a better world, it is the old ancient African traditions coming from Nile Valley works that will help us deal with how for thousands of years African people saw the world and how they responded. So Afrocentricity, I always tell people, is stronger today than it has ever been, because what Afrocentricity is about the agency of African people. And the agency of African people, in terms of based on our culture and our philosophy, is one of the strongest examples, I believe, in the world of an intellectual tradition that's based on concepts of Ma'at and the concepts of balance and harmony and so on. So how do you get to that? You get to that by saying every person who accepts and honors African culture acts in the interest of our own agency. We're not spectators to history. We're actors in history. We're not on the margins of Europe or Arab culture. We are ourselves cultural people, and we have contributions, yes, but we don't have to live on those contributions, but we say that we have things to say and things to do. So with this particular book, Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, what I think Na and I have tried to do is to say, you know what? We're not waiting for white people to write a book about race and about racial unity and racial this and racial that, racial cooperation, all that. We're not even writing about what our student Ibram Kendi wrote about, how to be anti-racist. We're raising another question. We're saying the other question is this. The other question is, perhaps we need to dismantle race itself. Get rid of this whole racial ladder and destroy it. And when we destroy the racial ladder, and Black people in the United States and in Jamaica become Africans, and we have an African-centered way of thinking, then we give the world something that is very powerful and very unique.
Or then we will have to struggle around class.
Yes, we always struggle around class.
So let me ask this question.
That is also an internal struggle that we will have to have. But if we deal with this question of culture, class will be taken care of, because class is only a small part of the bigger paradigmatic problem.
So you mentioned Isabella earlier, which I don't know much of us would ride for that book, even Ibram, and then so I want to ask this question. So you talk about ethical systems, and then even in the system, I saw the same things people who talk about Marxism, communism, socialism, anarchism argue. But in the book, you spend a lot of time on Michel Foucault, and you actually highlight his dismissal of Marxism and Leninism, which you only touch lightly on. It didn't seem like you dealt with it enough.
And I would have to say, I fully, like, just to add quickly, I just disagree, Dr. Dove, with how you describe Marx's analysis of primitive accumulation. He was not being demeaning to African people. He wasn't referring to primitive in the sense of primitive humanity. He was talking about the initial stage of the accumulation of resource. So I don't. But anyway,
that.
but go ahead. But go ahead.
I totally understand that. You know, because like you, I've read Marx very, very deeply, and I was a Marxist myself. But how culture helps in defining Marx's position is that he doesn't include culture, obviously, in his analysis, but what he is analyzing is culturally European. And he uses a step theory of evolution to say that what we used to do in the past is more primitive than what we're doing now. So he's using evolution as his foundational piece. And he is defining the way that Europeans who we're looking at from Jilp's position, the cradle theory position, coming out of the northern cradle and the domination of the woman, and then the construction of race and so on. What he does, and he's brilliant at defining it, but he's saying that this is the future. He's saying that you have to go through this to get to a future where humanity can be more free. But in that representation, what he's doing is saying he's staying on the evolutionary path, but he's also inside the race paradigm. So he's looking at Black humanity as inferior and as having to die for this future position of having wealth, and then going to the next level where you have your communism, freedom ideas or socialistic ideas. But the thing is that we can look back in Africa and we can find these socialist ideas already existing, which is probably where he got this notion that there could be a way of living peacefully and being a human being and acting out and becoming, you know, a developed person by his standards that he shows. But in this step, in this historical, cultural race paradigm, he sees it as a necessary event, the enslavement of Black people.
Absolutely.
And he sees that, you know, this is something that must happen. And so he's really, not that it has happened, but he's diminishing the humanity of African people in defining this European way of moving forward. You can go back to Ptah-hotep 4,500 years ago, who will tell you the same things that Marx is telling you from an African perspective, that greed and all these types of things are diminish your humanity, you know, and that is a mental illness. That is actually a disease, you know. So Marx is he's a brilliant man, and I don't take anything away from him. He's just a racist, and you know, his future is based on the necessity of being capitalist and greedy and disgusting for however long that's going to last, until we come to...
we wildly disagree on our reading of Marx. I don't agree with any of that. But I can't even, I don't even know how we got there. But okay.
You know, I wrote this 25 years ago or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
So I guess I wonder why. So instead of spending more time, which I guess I could get the answer there, but spending more honest time with Marx and Lenin, why did you decide to give so much Michel Foucault? Why did you?
No, we didn't spend. If I may, Brother Geechee, we didn't spend a lot of time with Foucault. I mean, I don't imagine we were very interested in the question of power. We wrote about maybe there's no more than a couple of pages where we dealt with Foucault's work. If my memory.
But Dr. Asante, let me ask you. Let me try to ask it this way. I'm sorry. Let me ask it this way because similar to what Geechee is saying, for instance. Because I have on my list of questions, I wanted to ask this too. You do for Marshall McLuhan, which I appreciated, by the way, what is not done for Marx.
That's right.
Marx is way more of a leftist and meaningful for Black revolutionaries than McLuhan.
Well,
that's why I'm saying, like,
that's a useful criticism. I don't have an
so
argument.
that would be my only point. I'm just saying, I'm just clear. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to defend Marx as completely correct, but I am saying that his positive impact on African people is way more important than I think is being given credit for here, while McLuhan, who has had no meaningful impact on African people, despite personally, I find his work interesting. He's given room to be corrected through Armand Townsend's work, which I'm also enjoying myself. So I just thought Marx deserved better than that. That's all. But go ahead.
I'm going to let certainly Dr. Dove will be writing more, I'm sure, on Marx. But let me just tell you my response to that. McLuhan, I think, because both of us, Dr. Dove at one time was associated with the State University of New York in Buffalo, and I was associated with that particular university. I got to meet McLuhan before he died, so I knew McLuhan, and it was in a couple of seminars with him in Toronto and in Mexico. So I knew McLuhan, and I think that may very well have come out in some of the writing, the way it turns out about the interest in him, because a lot of people have lost interest in him, and yet he was one of the first people to really deal with the whole television age and period and of media and so on. So that was what was important there. But in terms of Marx, let me just say this, that I agree with what Dr. Dove has said and what you have said about the significance of Marx. I mean, obviously, he is significant in world history, and a significant person in terms of the influence that he had on Black intellectuals, particularly on the African continent. But I always attribute that. In fact, in one of my books, I wrote on this. I attribute that to George Padmore, because Padmore was the greatest propagandist for Marxism during the Pan-African movement. He was, in fact, himself not organized, he was appointed, basically, to be the leader in Washington and D.C. When he came from Trinidad to go to school at Howard, they sort of waylaid him and said, "No, you're going to take this mantle, and you're going to be the person to push this idea." So George Padmore, when he left the U.S. and went to live in Europe, and ended up finally in London, but he had lived in Germany and in Russia, he became the biggest promoter and propagandist for the socialist position in the African world. He is the major one. I mean, I went through all of his works, so you can look at that. That's his influence on Nkrumah. That is his relationship with Du Bois. That's why people relate to it, and that's why the African continent, when they started their independence movements, many of them said, we're not capitalists, we're socialists." But when you had people to step back and think about what is the meaning of Africa in the context of this new movement of the 20th century, where do we go now in our own history and so on, then you began people to think deeper. Well, Africa is thousands of years older than Marxism. We had so much more stuff going on. Why are we caught in this paradigm? Aren't there paradigms that come out of our own history? Don't we have intellectuals and prophets and thinkers and men and women of intelligence who can come up with ways, patterns of living? Didn't we live in stability for hundreds of years, at least?
I hate to interrupt. Rick, one question.
Yeah,
So I wonder if, since all of us probably watched your debate with Kwame Ture and John Henry Clark, I wonder if you still being here with us, and we're grateful, has there been any shifts, and could you look at Marx, as Kwame would advise, as a methodology and an observation, as opposed to focusing on this white man?
What white man?
That white man, the Marx guy. The methodology and the observation, could you look at his work as that?
There are no white men, Geechee.
I thought he was talking about look at Marx. You mean look at Kwame?
No. What I'm saying is, as again, I don't remember. I don't know if you. I knew you remember, but I don't know if you have difference of opinions or adjusted since your debate with Toure and your debate with John Henry Clark. But Toure will probably thrust that you should look at Marx, Lenin, these people, as looking at their methodology and looking at their observation as opposed to focusing on them. Just like he said.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So I wonder if that could be a thing.
Yeah, that could be a thing. But here's what I say. Dr. Dove has already, she's done that work too, because I've read her work on the, I think, was it called The Logic of Karl Marx or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's written on that. So here's the thing. Kwame Ture, though, because he was also tending toward Afrocentric thinking, would have preferred to talk about the work of Nkrumah and Toure rather than Marx, even though he would say that he was a socialist. He saw Marx as Marx was, a great intellectual with a great method for basically helping to understand the capitalist role and the capitalist position in the world. And I think that was great. I don't think anybody criticizes Marx by saying that he was not a great thinker or that he was not a great person in terms of understanding. I mean, this is, again, out of the race paradigm because he's not a black man, right? So as a white man, I'm praising, right? So I'm saying that I don't think.
Wait, nobody's black or nobody's white now.
There you go, Diallo. But as a methodologist, absolutely, and he had an incredible impact and influence, not just on Africa, on the world. I mean, we can see that. I mean, everybody can see that. There's no question.
You had mentioned a short ways back that you referred to Jamaicans can be Africans if we get beyond the race. You talk about cultures, but I don't really see cultures being distinct from race. I don't really see multiple races or whatever you define or how you classify various phenotypes and peoples. But if a Jamaican can be African or should acknowledge that they're African, can a European, a Chinese, an East African also be, the East Indian also be African? Are the Arabs in North Africa for centuries, are they now African? Are the Afrikaners, the white, are they African as well? Once we transcend race, do these people have eligibility to be African since they all came from Africa originally? And
I had a white woman said to my oldest daughter that her name sounds like an Afrikaans name that this white woman is familiar with from back home. And I rejected that. I said that I will not accept that.
Remember, they said that when Elon Musk was the richest African in the world, was the richest man in the world is an African.
And John Kerry's wife was an African.
Oh, I was about to say that. You stole it. John Kerry's wife would have been the first African first lady. So once we transcend race, which is why I don't play that whole we all come from Africa business, because Chinese and Europeans are using that and playing with that fallacy in order to justify their return home to their motherland to extract their resources.
These are not the same people that we're talking about, and it's not the same objective. We're saying that humanity began in Africa and people migrated to all the different parts of the world, and culture changed the way that they viewed those worlds that they lived in and the environment and so on. So it's not, you're still using the race paradigm to make a mockery of it. But, these phenotypes are real, but it's how you view them. It's how you operate in the world. And we're saying that culture defines, and we're taking the Jopian perspective with this, because the anthropological perspective on culture, if you're going to use that concept of it, is racialized. So the African is the primitive in anthropology, in its definition of culture, and Europeans are the superior ones. So everything is based on superiority and inferiority of cultures. But what Jope does, he calls himself the authentic anthropologist, because he just looks at history and culture, and he can identify this historical process of African people achieving great things, and then Europeans coming along later and taking those things. So he looks at culture as a way that influences your mind, your thinking, your choice of institutional development, that all institutions are culturally defined, and to maintain the culture, and that we choose the different types of spiritual systems that we engage in, and the different things that we call education or medical systems or politics, and that they're vastly different based on these two cultural interpretations of them.
In a practical sense, I have a question. In a practical sense, in a real world materialist, I apologize, materialist sense, if Africans, should we unilaterally abandon race, and would that help advance us in terms of the genocidal oppression and hyper exploitation we endure? Or do we hold to race, and should the people who have weaponized phenotype, who have weaponized skin color, should they, like, how would it work? Do we who become enlightened individuals abandon race and racialized thinking, while the other?
It is true, and there's no denial in anything that we're writing that race as a concept and a belief system and a cultural construct, it exists in our minds. This is defines how we believe, what we believe, and how we act in the world. The battle is really for the mind. That's where the true battle is. And the thing is that what we're trying to say is that if you know it's false, and many people don't know it's false, but if you come to understand that it is a false construct, then the dismantling begins in your mind. You still work within the structure. Obviously, it's a totally racist structure. This is what we're living in and dying in. There's no denial of that. It's just about the understanding in our minds that it is false, because in that way you can seek different futures, different ideas, different potentials, and maybe who knows how long it takes. If you use culture, for instance, to look at Pan-Africanism or to look across Africa, rather than saying everybody's an African, who is culturally African, and you have to go to the old ideas, the Ma'atic ideas and that were codified in Kemet.
Now let me throw
Go
You
ahead.
know, people are Arabs first, they're Islam first, Christian, all these things, and yet they're calling themselves African. We're trying to say that there is a distinction in the way that people behave and think, and that we can produce a model that we can use. We're not saying, you know, it doesn't exist. Of course it does, but it isn't true. It's a lie. And to identify it as a lie, you know, and prove that it's a lie,
And
you know, that's the beginning in the mind of a different way of thinking about things. You know, we can carry on using the model, but it will only turn into what we've already experienced. Only we'll be the ones.
which means that, and this is the gift that I'm gonna give to Brother Diallo. This is the gift I'm gonna give to you, which means, therefore, that all people who are phenotypically Black may not be in African culture. And that's why I threw out the name of Clarence Thomas earlier, right? And that there may be somewhere in the world, a person who you look at phenotypically as white in that racial paradigm, who very well may practice African culture.
Who? But
My
so
gift to you.
who? What? Real quick.
Think about that for a long time.
We're gonna think about it for a long
Yeah,
time. But okay,
I have
two things. Who get to defines what African culture is? That's one. So we talk about epistemology. I know, but who's we? Because we could be LeBron James. Y'all said LeBron James was
based on evidence, based on the evidence that of what African people have achieved and accomplished and have done and who they are.
Yeah. No, I get that, because but even though we say on evidence based off what we achieve, you have to remember African people are still celebrating people like Mansa Musa for being the richest man. So the framework still can be white, right? It still could be like measuring who has the most money, who has the most whatever. And so I'm curious, one, whenever we had that argue about who gets to define what's African, that's one. And then two, I really want to know how you think, or how you thought, like people like LeBron James, Colin Kaepernick was radically innovative and they were attacking racism. Like, how did y'all see that play out? Because I'm not sure that I saw the same.
Well, the thing is that any person who attacks the concept of white superiority or European racial superiority in the sense of race in quotes, any person who attacks that is in effect helping to dismantle the racial ladder, the racial that whole paradigm that's in people's minds. And in that way, that's how you can do it. That it may be episodic. In other words, maybe this one time or two times, but it may not be a lifestyle. But there's some of us who live every day. I tell people every day, my whole life is undermining racism, because racism is a real fact, see? But race is not. So part of it in the biological sense, when people start talking about biology of race and so on, then that's problematic according to science. But in terms of the effects of what this system, this false system has done, it has material consequences for people. So you have to fight it every day. And I wake up every morning saying this is a good day for battle. This is always because it comes at you, and you have to dismantle. You have to work to dismantle it. You have to be conscious, because if you're not conscious, you fall into the paradigm of following your enemies into the discourse of race. And that's
and some of us, sorry to butt in there, just to add to you, some of us are believing in this and acting out the same European tendencies and hating ourselves and hating us and destroying Black people before white people. They'll tell you, I hate white people, and people they destroy are Black people. How do you answer that?
Every
We're
day.
using the race paradigm. and they're
Every day I
saying
see it.
black people are superior, but the people they destroy are black, and the people they leave alone are white. That's a funny contradiction to me.
It is.
But that's the truth of that's a reality that there are black people, African descent, who are destroying black people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't understand.
And the way I just want to say, tag on with 1 minute, Diallo, please. The only thing I want to say, and people do that because they is either confusion or they are themselves inside of the race paradigm. You see, and that race paradigm, it would not allow you to see what is culturally strong and significant for an Afrocentric agency. That's a position I want to take.
And you can't see the race paradigm as a cultural construction either when you're inside it, because people inside it diminish what culture actually is.
And let me say one other thing. I'm going to do another gift at y'all right here. That is why, and Dr. Dove will understand this, but that is why we have had these continuing battles, for example, about what do you do with trans people, right? So as Afrocentrists and as people who believe in the dignity affirming all human life and the fact that being human being, and in order to transform the race discourse, we say that the Afrocentrists, true to the sense of African cultural agency, has to support all human life. And of course, what do we get? You get a rejection on the part of people who are into a narrow provincial racist.
Well, part of what was that initial critique against.
I wanted to throw that out there because I know that's a bone out there.
No, right? No. But part of it, and I did want to ask you about to expand on that, because as I read the book, I saw some of what other African-centered thinkers or claimants to the African-centered thought were saying was this was a departure. And you looking to appease and by extension me in wanting to engage the work and Diallo as well, and
me too. I got a trans emoji.
Yeah, all of us on screen have been dragged and claimed to have been representing the queer agenda now.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'm part of your group. I'm part of your
group.
That's
what. No, I'm saying it's your fault. You got us dragged into it. It's your fault. But when I read but now, as I said, to be perfectly fair, from how I'm reading it, as I'm reading the book. So when I read, let me just put it together this way for me, because I know we don't have a lot of time for all of our full thoughts. When I read the critique of Marx, what I perceive as more room being made for people like Foucault and McLuhan, and then I read sort of not praise songs, but also not critiques for people like Ibram Kendi. I think was Ta-Nehisi Coates was another one.
Yeah, Tony.
I see. That's why I'm saying I see this book as trying to enter more of a mainstream conversation. Which I think obviously is your intent here. But that does leave room even for me a little bit, and I think others to have more room to run with this idea that you're no longer talking to African people directly. You're no longer trying to inspire, and then as an extension of that, when you make room in the book by outlining African perspectives on gender and sexuality, that's where the doors come fully open for this criticism of, oh, there goes Asante. Now he's with the queer folks. He's trying to rock with the hot new wave or the queer agenda. And by extension, the rest of us on screen, if for simply not condemning you, are dragged in as supporters of that same thing. But as I said, so I'll stop here by saying when I read how I interpret what you wrote in this book, I read you as saying that European concepts of sexuality and gender are informing criticisms in the Pan-African community against queer, trans Africans from being included. And you're saying that's not an appropriate approach, that there is an African-centered or an Afrocentric approach to understanding how gender and sexuality play. And we're reading into it a very Eurocentric view, and that's leading to disunity among our within our community. So I'll stop there. Go ahead, and anyone else, or you can respond, please.
My wife, she teaches a class on difference. It has a different title, but and she opens every class with asking each student to identify their race, nationality, and ethnicity, and pretty much find that most people are extremely confused and or dismissive of this, really understanding the difference between those two things, or what category applies to them. And even though we have a vast majority of people who are extremely ignorant of race and its origins, I don't really see how this speaks to our material or physical reality or how it transforms it. I'll try to ask again. As we reject race or pretend that race isn't real, or come up with a whole new title for classifying our phenotypical hair texture, skin color, lineage, history, we come up with a different title than race because it is identified. It goes all the way back to the earliest human means of communication to the future, that we saw and understood that there were physical differences and biological differences. If you look at the medical industry, there's a whole movement to allow more Black people into medical studies, because the standard white, middle-aged white man in medical studies is leading to misdiagnosis and iatrogenic impacts, negative iatrogenic impacts on non-white men, Black people, Black women, other non-white people. So race and the differences between these people who had different environmental adaptation and different genetic mutations throughout history. So ultimately, I really don't see how this new human being, and in the post-racial or transcending race or erasing race, is really going to speak to any of the conditions that were created through racism and white hegemony and white domination. How will it stop it? How will it reverse it? How will it address it?
Well, I think that the way we stop it is to be engaged in encountering it, encountering the racial ladder everywhere and fighting against it all the time. That is the only way you can do it. The only way you can do it is to challenge it. So let me give an example. My wife doesn't like me giving this example because she says I always talk about sports, but maybe I try to put a science thing in there. Don't just give them examples from the sports field. Give them, because I always say that when I grew up, there were times, because at 80 years old, I know that there were times when people were saying that Black football players couldn't be quarterbacks. Y'all don't remember that, but I remember that, right? Blacks could not be quarterbacks.
I look pretty. I'm not that young, though.
Yeah. No, I don't believe it, but I assert I wish Black people were not in football at all.
Right. So now you're like, so then let me give an example. So now the head of NASA, the National Astronautical Space thing, is an African woman. All right. The person who developed Moderna vaccine is an African American woman, right? Scientist. Okay, now I'll give you those examples. All right. Now, in the past, under the race paradigm, Black people couldn't be quarterbacks because we were not thinkers. Or in the past, Black girls couldn't be gymnasts. And now many African American girls who are college students who are gymnasts dominate gymnastics. But at one time, we couldn't even play, that you couldn't be out there, right? What is this? This is a challenge to the racial ladder that has white people at the top. It is, again, to destroy this notion of white people being superior in every sector of society. So we have to do, that's what we have to challenge. So the challenge is not that we just have to say, I'm a race person. The challenge is to destroy and undermine white supremacy, because white supremacy is the main culprit in all of this. It structures all of this. It structures education, religion, everything in America, economics, all this you have to destroy. So the destruction of that will be something that brings about the sense that we affirm all human dignity. And the affirmation of human dignity is the key point. And I think that that shows us as leaders, as intellectual and cultural leaders of the world, rather than, anything else. I mean, I guess that's the main point I wanted to make, but there was something else.
Can I add to that? I'd like to say that it's an educational process. It is actually a process, and we are educators. So the thing is that we, if we can have a vision for a different future and see how this impacts on our minds, that we can, use this as a way to teach our students, to help them dismantle it as well. So, it just brings more clarity to the existing conditions, but it is a futuristic thing. And, I'm sure many of you find that the things that you wrote and thought before, as Dr. Asante said, were things that were not, not publishable or looked at with disdain. And they're coming into an understanding now, as we move along in this battle for the mind and the physical battle that's going on. So I think it's a visionary type of thing, a futuristic type of thing. And right now, what we look at the terrain and we analyze it based on the cultural thing, and then we can see certain things, and we use that, just apply it. It isn't anything to be fearful of or to hate or anything like that. Just use it to look at the things that we usually use to define within the race paradigm what's going on, and just use a cultural paradigm to do the same thing. And you can see people outside the race paradigm.
Geechee, I just want to make sure that you can raise it up, but I just want to, first of all, I want to thank everybody. I know we have to wrap here in a few minutes, unfortunately. I know I do. I at least I know I do. I have a class. So we, but I greatly appreciate you both joining us this morning and engaging the discussion. Given how I started the show, which is separate from both of you, I just think it's important that we are able to come on here and disagree a little bit and chop it up. So I deeply appreciate that. But okay, Geechee, go ahead, and then we can let our guests have any concluding.
Yeah. So Dr. Dove, you're in the UK or in you said
I'm at Temple.
Oh, I thought you said something about UK.
Oh no, right now I'm
right
in
now
Melbourne.
she is.
I'm
yeah.
I'm in Melbourne because I'm trying to take time to heal and recover.
Absolutely.
Well, speedy recovery, and thank you for dealing with the time difference too. Shout out to you for that as well.
It's my pleasure. It's such an honor to meet you all, and thank you so much for the invitation. I feel honored to be amongst great thinkers, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right on. Dr. Asante, anything you want to say before we let you both go?
I really enjoyed this. I didn't know I would enjoy it so much. It was very beautiful, very wonderful. You guys are bright and sharp and on point. And I hope to see you again. And thank you.
Right on. I think we should try to
well,
do this
I know
again.
it's early for you.
Yes, indeed. Get some rest. Speedy recovery. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick break and come back. But to you, we'll say peace because we're willing to fight for it and catch you next time. Thank you very much. Back in a second. All right, fellas. Good show. A lot done today. I think that was great. And you know, it is what it is. We just, you know, not everybody gonna be on the same page all the time, but I think that was very good. And anyway, like I said, I enjoyed it. Anyway, what you think?
The ink is black, the pages are white. Y'all remember that song?
I do.
Let's see, racism, man, all unite. Listen, I'm about to get out here and figure out how I can get some of that Skip Gates, Clarence Thomas money since we all align. If we think alike, I don't know why. Where my
so I didn't hear him saying that. I heard him saying the opposite of that.
We all
You're not gonna get.
He said with me, Clarence and Skip Gates are all.
No, but listen,
no.
No, Clarence was kind of radical before. He was radical at one point, right?
Yeah, he was a Black Panther. Yeah,
yeah.
Clarence?
Yes, for like about 10 seconds, but he was over there. He was over there for
I mean,
a while.
he got a life. Yeah, he was.
Look, to be fair to our guests, what I heard them say was that when you claim to be a race man, though there are differences, you categorically put yourself in league with people, or you allow other people who falsely claim that to put themselves in league.
Yeah, so, what I'm supposed to right. So why I got to get what they got? If we all align. And I mean, I could have said I was going to say because if I got to be with Clarence, he got to hang with Dolezal because Dolezal has articulated a lot of those. It's really about culture, and you can be if you live African or Black culture, then you are categorically and ultimately a Black person because it's about culture, not just about phenotype and lineage and all that jazz. So, I mean,
anyway,
if I got to pick a side.
Look, anything you all want to let folks know about? Because I got to go pick up my girls. This dismissal stuff is just messing up my whole schedule.
I'll be in Los Angeles next week. So holla at me, LA folks. So
are you gonna be with? Does that mean you're not with us next week?
I'll be back by Friday.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I ain't got money to be gone that long.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I gotta be right back.
I gotta
be back in time to clock in. No,
yeah, I was about to say, what are you talking about?
I'll be back here Friday, but I'll be out Monday for the radio show.
Don't come back with an eye tattoo.
I don't know. Depends on how stuff plays out. You know,
he gonna come back talking about
the coach's top thought leader.
I might, who knows? Wait, I might find a new culture to join since, you know, racism the thing. Orderly, I might come back.
Oh, wow.
Selling oranges and shit. Okay.
Geechee, anything you want to let us know? Because I got to dip. I got to go.
Nah, y'all just join. We go take over the world and build our own economy. And I want y'all to join
economy. Right on.
Yeah.
Diallo, big shout out. You know, the show launched on our platform this week. That was great. And everybody who missed it, check it out. Please check out everything else that has been launching on the platform. A lot of stuff coming out. So just make sure you got everything subscribed and belled up and everything and share everything. Try to keep up with Quaker Anarchist with the social media support for BPM. Quaker Anarchist is leading, and Sugar Booger are leading the social media support for BPM. So try to catch up with them a little bit.
Right.
Anyway, a lot more coming up, but as usual, we say peace to you, as you know, as long as you're willing to fight for it, like Fred used to say. We'll catch you next time here at Earn Your Liberation on Black Power Media. Catch y'all next time. Peace, everybody.